Hello everyone who's decided to tune into this video, all 30 of you. So, if you're here, and I'm here, that can only mean one thing. A new review! I have a feeling this is going to be my best one yet, until the next video comes out, and then that video will be my best one, and then the next video after that one comes out, and then that will be my best one.
Now, I just need to think of a game to do a review on.
This?
Nah.
This?
Nope.
What about this?
This is too long. I'll save this for my Twitch streams.
You can't go wrong with this.
I know, I'm just not feeling it.
Come on, we need to think of something to do a review on. How about this?
Yes, it's perfect.
Oh, and why?
I don't know, but we gotta pick something. But wait,
What now?
I can't do this one.
Why not?
It's the old version. It has forced motion controls. Ugh. If only I had the HD version that didn't have motion controls in it. Well, this is great. But wait, where'd this come from? Who cares? Let's play.
Okay, so a little history of my relationship with this game. Back when I was 9 and I got my Wii, whenever me and my family would go out, and on the rare occasion that we would go to a video game store, I would usually go to the Wii section and look at all the games that I couldn't buy because I was 9, and 9-year-olds don't usually have any source of income unless you count allowance you get from chores, which usually only amounts to like $5 to $10, which means you'd have to like wait a month before you could even buy a game, so it was a whole tedious, arduous process, but whenever you eventually did get a game, it was an event. Was I going anywhere with this? I can't be sure, but one of the games I usually see on the shelves was this one game called Okami. Now, there were like two halves of my brain thinking whenever I look at this game. The first half was like, this game looks cool, but the other half is like, nah, let's keep looking. I don't know why I chose to listen to that half of my brain because I missed out on a really good game. However, let's say like 5 years later, I stumbled upon a couple Let's Plays of it, and after watching it, I thought to myself, this game's amazing, I gotta have it. Then 2 years later, around New Year's, I got the Wii version of the game, and I thought it was great. Also, yeah, even though I already own the Wii version of the game, I'm gonna be playing the HD remaster on the PS4. Why, you ask? Because I want the picture to look great on my video, and I have a few teeny tiny, itsy bitsy, microscopic gripes with the Wii version, and in all regards to motion controls. Now that that's out of the way, onto the actual development history of this game. This game came out in 2006 for the PS2 and the Wii, as I have already mentioned. Okami was created by the now defunct Clover Studios, who created one of my favorite games, Beautiful Joe. Hearing about the company going defunct, you probably feel a little bad, but do not fret about Clover Studios being gone. Most of the people from Clover Studios, including the director of this game, went on to create Platinum Games. So, they're doing fine. The director of this game was Hideki Kamiya, who created a lot of great games consisting of Resident Evil, Devil May Cry, and Bayonetta. Hideki first came up with the idea of this game when he decided he wanted to create a game where you play as a wolf and flowers bloom when you run. It looked beautiful, but there was one major problem. Hideki thought the game was boring, so he went back and changed a few things. He still kept the wolf and the flowers blooming effect, but then he added some new ideas, like combat and puzzle solving elements. We can get to the gameplay aspects in a moment. First, the story. Long ago in an ancient land, Orochi, the 8-headed dragon unleashed an unspeakable evil. But the foolish Nagi, wielding the magic sword, stepped forth to oppose. Unfortunately, he was failing and almost died. But then, with the help of a wolf named Jiranui and some sake, Nagi was able to defeat Orochi and seal him away for 100 years. The two made it back to Nagi's home, village of Kamiki. There was a party, and I think everyone was super grateful to the wolf for helping Nagi or something, and then life goes on and stuff.
100 years later, some random guy goes to the moon shrine where Orochi is being kept and removes the sword that is keeping Orochi locked up. Orochi escapes and begins to unleash his evil onto the world again. A wolf,
That's you.
named Amaterasu or Amy or Amy, as another character I'll mention later, wakes up and is told that she has to get the 13 brushstroke techniques and use them to defeat Orochi.
And there's the basis for our adventure. Unfortunately, if I had to give some constructive criticism, is that the story part takes a bit longer to explain in the game. Like a good 10 to 20 minutes before you can even play as Amy. And it doesn't even stop there. There will be a lot of really long cutscenes in the game. Something else I forgot to mention about the story, but as big as they build up Orochi as the big evil entity, he is not even the main villain of our story. You defeat him a third of the way through the game. And then you fight this nine-tailed fox, and that's still not the end of the game. No, you have to fight this giant sphere named Yama. By the time you fight him, you will have put 40 hours into this game. So keep that in mind if you don't want to play a super long game. Which means you're stupid. Woo! That was long, but I think I should switch over to the visuals or presentation part of this review now. So, like I said, the cutscenes are usually super long, just humongous exposition dumps, and to make it even better, there is no voice acting in this game. This game decides to do the Banjo-Kazooie or Animal Crossing approach, where everyone speaks in this weird gibberish with a text box at the bottom, so you have to read what they're saying. I don't mean to critique this really good game that's just got a few downsides to it, but now onto the good stuff. I love the 2D to 3D mishmash art style that they got going on. It's like, it's 3D, but at the same time, it has the same huge moving outline to see it on 2D cartoon like Ed, Edd, and Eddy. The art style looks beautiful. They're paying homage to those Japanese ink wash paintings with woodcuts and watercolors. They always like to play up those parts where you restore one of the huge cherry blossom trees, and then it purifies the area around it. This game has got a whole painting theme going on. You see, that's how like you use your tail as a brush throughout the entire game. Now, despite this serious plot, the game still has humorous moments, like your travel companion Isud, this super tiny guy who loves boobs, or the old man of Kamiki Village, Mr. Orange. He's always saying and doing something funny. I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but Oh, and you can't forget about Susanoo, the descendant of Nagi. He wants to live up to him, but is lazy, doesn't care, and never takes anything he does really seriously unless it involves saving the Saki girl. Okay, so I don't know how many minutes we're at, but I think this video is starting to get a little long, so let's just move on to the gameplay and then the closing thoughts. So, where to start with the gameplay? Oh, okay, I got it. This game's a lot like Zelda, but more combat-oriented. You go around the world, helping out people and going to dungeons, learning brushstroke techniques, but when you're not doing that, you get into fights. Throughout the world and fields are floating scrolls. If you touch one, you get into a fight. Like I said, the game is more combat-oriented, so you will be getting into a lot of fights. There are 3 different weapon types that you can choose from to either use them as your main weapon or your sub-weapon. First, there are the mirrors, or reflectors, if you will. You just hit enemies with them. There isn't really anything extraordinary about that. However, if you put them in the sub-weapon slot, you can use them as a shield. This is the first weapon type you get, so they're trying to keep things basic, I guess. The second weapon types are the rosaries. If you put them in the main weapon slot, you use them as a whip to hit enemies with multiple times. The trade-off being that the rosary isn't as strong as the mirror or the third weapon type, which means each attack only hits a tiny bit, but since it's multiple attacks, I'd say it still does about the same amount of damage. If you put the rosaries in the sub-weapon slot, they become bullets or projectiles that you can shoot at enemies, which is effective for attacking enemies from a distance if you don't feel like getting up close and personal. The third weapon type, and my personal favorite, are the swords. You can swing them around like regular swords, but if you hold down the attack button, you'll charge it up, and then when you release it, it does a massive amount of damage. I would not recommend putting them in the sub-weapon slot, however, because all you get is a stab attack, which I never really used. But deciding which weapons you're going to use are just half the combat, or more like 70% of the combat. The rest involves using those brushstroke techniques. Okay, seeing as I've gone this long without explaining the paintbrush mechanic, which is a huge part of this game, I guess now I should explain it. If you hold down a button, on PS4 it was L2, the game will pause, and then you take control of Amy's tail, which she uses as a paintbrush. You then use her paint tail to draw different symbols on the screen, each one doing something different. For instance, when fighting an enemy, you can draw a line onto the enemy to do a slash attack, or you can draw an upside down Q and create a bomb to hit multiple enemies at once. Or you could draw like a lowercase cursive E and create a whirlwind, which is really effective on the enemies with parasols. You could also use the techniques to do these things called floral finishers. So whenever you defeat an enemy, if you do a brushstroke technique on them, the enemy will drop a demon fang, which you use those as a form of currency at a specific store. Although you need to use the right technique on the enemy if you expect them to drop the demon fang, and the game doesn't specifically state which technique you're supposed to use on each enemy, so you just gotta keep guessing which technique it is you're supposed to use until if you get it right and they drop a demon fang. The last part of the battles is the grading system. At the end of every battle, you get graded on how well you performed, with the grade being marked by a cherry blossom tree. A cherry blossom tree being the best you can do, and a seed being the worst you can do. The better you do, the more money you get at the end of battles. And well, it's not as invigorating as the grading system in Bayonetta. I still feel motivated to get the best grade whenever I can. Okay, so despite all this talk about combat is only like half of the game. The other half is everything else. So, as I said earlier, this game is a lot like Zelda. Although, maybe there's some people here who don't really know what Zelda is. So, I guess I should explain Zelda too. So, in Zelda, you go around the world and you find dungeons, and then you solve the puzzles in the dungeons and you fight bosses at the end of them. It's the same thing in Okami, although it seems a little bit easier and kind of basic for a Zelda game. Like, the puzzles aren't really that difficult. If you've gotten a new item, or in this game's case, a new brushstroke technique, use that technique to solve puzzles in the dungeons, and then you fight a boss using the technique as well. On a side note, this game overall is actually really easy. I don't think I ever died once in this game. This game has a system where you have a stomach and you can find food lying around the world, and whenever you eat it, it gets added to your stomach. And then when it fills all the way up, you can use it as a reserve tank or a fairy in a bottle, so that when you die, your health immediately gets restored. But enemies in this game don't pose such a huge threat, and if you take any damage, enemies usually drop health when they're defeated that restore your health, and in addition to one stomach, you can eventually upgrade to have 2 stomachs in case you die twice. But I didn't die once, so it ended up being pointless. I don't really know where to put this in my video, but I should talk about this before I forget. Remember how at the beginning of the video I said I didn't like the Wii version because of the motion controls? Well, I just don't really like them. They only feel responsive half the time, and the other half it feels like I'm fighting with them. This has got to be one of the few times that I didn't really like the motion controls. For instance, I'll be trying to do some brushstroke techniques, but in like the PS4 or PS2 version, you just move the cursor around with the joystick. But in the Wii version, you have to point the Wii remote at the screen to move the cursor and draw it. And I always have trouble holding the Wii remote steady as I draw, so my circle or straight line always seems to be off a little bit, and then the game doesn't register it as a line or a circle. And then I just have to keep trying until I eventually do get it right. It gets really annoying during like that quick time event with Mr. Orange's Bloom Dance. You have to keep drawing circles, but my circles always seemed off a little bit, and then the game doesn't register it, and then I have to start the whole dance over again. And then, in fighting, Instead of pushing an attack button to attack, you shake the Wii remote, which is fine, but I don't really know how to charge my sword when I fight, so I didn't use it as much. Okay, so I've talked about combat in dungeons, so I guess the other thing I could talk about is exploring the overworld. In between fighting monsters and exploring dungeons, you'll be trudging around all of Japan, coming across other people and helping them with any problems they have, which could lead to doing possibly anything with them involving fighting monsters or doing mini games. For example, you could chase after this one guy named Ida in Shinshu Fields. Or you could go to a dojo and learn new combat skills from the sensei Onigiri. Or you could do the dreaded digging mini game. Another side quest that you could do is you can come across a person who gives you a bounty list and wants you to hunt 5 specific enemies. And if you complete it, they give you some gold dust, which you can apply to your weapon to permanently power it up. Other things you could do are restore dead trees, or if you see some light shining on the ground, go up to that spot and dig it up and you'll find a clover. You know, the Clover Studios.
Clover.
You can also restore the clover. Also, if you find any hungry animals, feed them. Doing any of these 3 things will grant you praise points, and you can use those to increase your health points, or more paint bottles, or ability to hold more money, or a second stomach. Alright, I've talked long enough. This game is pretty good, and you should go and play it. It's definitely on the easier side of these types of games, if you're confused about what I mean by these types of games. I'll do a review on other games a lot like this one in the near future. But anyways, the art style is amazing, and the combat is great. Also, it's not really violent, so you can get it for your kids if they're looking for a game where you can play as a dog and fight ink monsters. It's a real untapped market. And best of all, you can get the PS4 version for only $20. But anyways, that's all the time we have for this video. Go ahead and leave a comment about what you thought of the video, and don't forget to like and subscribe. And see you in the next video, whenever it's coming out. Okay, bye.